What's funny is that when this thing showed up to my house a few weeks back and I actually got to use it in my home and not in a packed booth at something like CES, I was mind blown. I had so many questions originally, like why ASUS would choose to put a 180Hz IPS panel on here and not an OLED display. I was thinking to myself, what is even the point of this form factor, and wouldn't something like a conventional laptop just be better for what this is trying to accomplish? And lastly, I was thinking, who is this thing even for? Apparently me. Look, this is hands down the coolest piece of tech that I've gotten a chance to look at. It encapsulates pretty much everything that I love: computers, tablets, gaming, and it does so incredibly well. It's been almost 2 months since I've had this in my possession, and usually, like, that's the honeymoon phase, you know? Spend a little time with it, get super excited about it, and then scratch your head looking at it across the room collecting dust, thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I own that thing. That, oddly enough, even though I honestly thought it would be, isn't the case with the Z13. There's so many use cases, from like your typical laptop sitting at a desk doing work position to slapping it down on a table tent style with its sturdy kickstand and controller. And the Z13 does so many things almost perfectly, except for one, but we'll get to that near the end of the video because I want to talk to you about what makes this thing actually tick and what makes this so interesting. Before we go any further though, I just want to say thank you so much for the support that you've shown me on this channel. We are literally halfway to 100,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you all enough. I never thought that that was a number that like I'd even be creeping towards. So for it to be that close, even though it is so far away, I just want to say thank you. And if you enjoyed this video, a like and a sub goes a really long way. I think we should dive into the form factor, what using this thing is actually like, if it's suitable for gaming or professional workflows, and just give you an idea of what this thing is actually like to use, truthfully. I say that because I want you to see this thing's true potential and what it's actually like before I talk about that one big problem. So this is a tablet, sort of. It's like a Microsoft Surface, kind of, if you know what those are, except it's a lot thicker and a lot more powerful. The form factor might seem weird, right? I mean, you're trading convenience with convenience? No, that's not right. You're trading comfort for convenience? No, that looks comfortable to me. Okay, well, at least you're probably looking at this thing thinking it's a little annoying to use, right? It's got this tablet form factor so that you kind of have to deal with this floppy keyboard and a kickstand, and that means that using it on a lap is possible, but it's not necessarily ideal. And the typing experience, actually, the typing experience is very good. The only thing is, like, you're not going to get that sturdy, very solid aluminum build on something like a G16 or like a MacBook, and you will notice a little bit more flex. But as far as the actual keyboard and the trackpad go and actually using this thing, it's actually really good. And with that being said, this form factor actually comes with quite a lot of pros that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Number one, your conventional laptop usually has its intake on the bottom and it exhausts out the side or through the keyboard deck, meaning that sometimes when you're playing a game, your hands or your nether region is going to be a little bit toasty. And I don't know about you guys, but down the line, eventually I want to have kids, so, you know, putting like the sun on my lap is probably not a good idea when I just want to play a couple of games. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but when using a laptop, you know, when it's not on a table or without some sort of riser, you actually are effectively giving up some sort of performance in the way of thermal throttling, because you can't exactly pull in fresh air or exhaust it quickly enough if you're suffocating it. Though with the Z13, it doesn't really matter what position it's in, whether it's on a desk, whether it's being laid flat or in your hands, it's always pulling in fresh air, and it's doing that quite quietly, might I add. And number two, with something like this, the use cases are kind of endless. You can use it as a drawing tablet, a second screen for watching YouTube videos or having meetings. You can even dock it to your setup and have a secondary touchscreen while your main monitor is doing all the legwork. You basically get the benefit of having 2 or more devices in one, except that this thing can actually play games. And I don't mean like flash games or like cozy titles. I mean, it can play full-on heavy AAA titles, and it is impressive. We will talk about performance in a minute though. I just want to explain what actually makes this thing possible in this form factor. So inside, it's got AMD's new Ryzen AI Max Plus 395. As much as I hate the name, I have to admit it that this thing is actually game changing, and I really don't mean that lightly. This is an APU, and what that means in this case is integrated graphics. But before you roll your eyes, this is about on par with something like a 4070 mobile. Now, which version of the 4070 mobile? God knows, because there's so many different types of variations of laptops that have higher TDPs and whatnot. But my point that I want to make about this is that it doesn't matter. The performance that I'm getting out of here, I have the G16 with the 4090. There are times where it's about on par with that. And obviously that is a sleek laptop that is meant to be like form over function first. But like this having integrated graphics competing with that at all it's crazy. And now, because this is actually an APU, it has the 8060S inside of it, that being the integrated graphics, it shares its video memory with the CPU. So this model right here is the base model. It has 32 gigs of RAM. And honestly, for what I've been using this for, it's been perfectly fine. That being said, they do sell a 64 gig and 128 gig variant of the Z13, which is mind blowing because yes, you guessed it, on the Z13 with the 128 gigs of RAM, you can allocate up to 96 gigabytes just for the GPU. Now, what's important about this setup though, is the amount of power required to get great performance out of it, because it's not much since it's a very efficient APU. In performance mode, you draw anywhere between 40 to 70 watts, and in turbo, it takes it anywhere from about 60 to 90. Now, what this means is, well, the chassis isn't necessarily thermally constrained. It's not going to become a blast furnace, so your precious fingers are safe, and you also don't necessarily need to carry around its included 200-watt charger. I'll just post a thread of someone who explained this a lot better than I could, but basically there's a Reddit thread where this guy broke down how to actually use the Z13 with a 100-watt charger, what you can expect, charging speeds, and so on. From what I've pulled away from that, if you have this base model right here and you are using the performance preset and not turbo, you can very easily get away with using a 100-watt USB-C power adapter, which makes not only carrying this thing a lot easier since you don't have to bring the brick around, but you can also just keep the brick docked at your desk for when you are connecting it to something like a display, and have a power adapter to take with you on the go that is essentially much cheaper than buying those 200-watt power adapters. I hope that made sense because that was just kind of like a spiel, but anyways. I will say the one thing that I do like about the power adapter is that it does use a proprietary connector, so when using it, you don't give up any I/O, but it's not like this thing is incredibly limited by any means. Now, there is a micro SD card slot, and I wish this was a full size since I do deal with photos and videos and have regular SD cards. It's also not a problem because I feel like the intended use for this was to use it as a cheap and quick, easy way to upgrade the internal storage of the Z13. So for that, it's perfect. Now, there are also two USB 4 ports capable of power delivery, and they have DisplayPort capabilities with 40 gigabits a second speeds. And there is also a full-sized HDMI 2.1 port, which can give you 120 Hz at 4K with 10-bit color. On the right side, there's a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A. Oh my god, these names are getting incredibly long, but it can do 10 gigabits a second. Oh, and there is also a headphone microphone line in. But yeah, overall, despite this feeling like a pretty small chassis, and you know, these ports not necessarily feeling like they're, you know, mind-breaking or whatever, it is really crazy that they were able to put all of this on this machine and not really give up function just because of its form factor. My only wish is that these were placed a little lower, since when using the Flow, all your cables can kind of stick out of the top, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. And for those that care, there is a front and rear facing camera, and it does support Windows Hello facial recognition. Now, there is also dual 2-watt speakers. They sound pretty good. They're not like amazing. They're not mind-blowing by any means. For gaming and watching YouTube and stuff, like they honestly are pretty serviceable and nothing that I've really complained about. And this also does support Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, which will just ensure faster download speeds and connectivity if you have a router that can support it like I do. Now, I promise I'm not blue-balling you, but there is one thing that I feel like is essential to be touched on before we go any further, and that's the display. Look, I'm in agreement that this should have been an OLED panel. Their higher-end laptops have 240 Hz OLED displays like the G16. And yeah, for a premium device, I think OLED makes sense. The thing is, and I don't want this to sound like I'm sugarcoating, this display is actually very good. It's very good. It's 13.4 inches with a 2.5K resolution, and for when it comes to this device's form factor, I really feel like this is like as close to perfect as it can be. And even when you consider the bezels at the top and bottom of the display, it allows you to have a much longer keyboard deck, which gives you a bigger wrist rest area and pretty sizable touchpad considering how compact this form factor is. Importantly though, this thing covers 100% of the DCI-P3 color gamut, and it's Pantone validated, which means that if you're doing things like content creation or photo editing or video editing, you can get around with using the Z13 and it will give you a really good experience. It also has adaptive sync, which eliminates screen tearing, and like I mentioned earlier, has a 180 Hz refresh rate. The thing is, like, this is gonna be silly to say because in the videos and stuff and where I film, you're probably not gonna think it's a problem at all. This display looks really bright. I wish it was just a little bit brighter when it comes to being, say, like outdoors or something, for example, or being right beside a really big window. I feel like the Flow just doesn't have as much output as I would like, especially considering the screen is quite glossy as well and is a little bit harsh with reflections. But back to the whole OLED thing, if this thing did have an OLED panel, it would be a lot more expensive. And the only thing that makes this thing honestly tough to recommend to people is the price point. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about gaming on this thing. So I've been playing a lot of games on this, mostly first-person shooters. Games like Black Ops 6, Battlefield 2042, and I've also played this new game called Fragpunk, which is kind of like a Valorant and Call of Duty baby. Now, I'll throw up average FPS numbers on the screen for these titles that I'm playing, but there's a few things that you should know about. Every single game that I'm playing is being played at native resolution, and in this case, these titles are being played in the performance profile. The reason that I'm not demonstrating turbo, for one, I really don't think that you need to use the turbo profile, and two, most of what you're seeing can be played unplugged using the performance preset in Armory Crate, and also will give you a great experience on a 100-watt power adapter. So this should give you a relatively good idea of what this thing is actually capable of when away from a wall. Now, I was genuinely surprised at how well Call of Duty ran, for example. Now, you can get great performance on the Flow without using any sort of FSR or special upscaling, but what impressed me a lot was how far I was actually able to push it when using FSR. When it comes to shooters, I think maximizing your frame rate is important, but being able to do that on here with no noticeable quality loss or any changes to input latency is just nuts. Call of Duty is the only title that I've played on here using FSR, since the game, to be honest, can be quite poorly optimized, so it just gives me a little bit of headroom. But Battlefield, for example, a game that's much larger, has a much bigger scale, more players, I'm running it without using any sort of upscaling. And there's something to be said about how well the Flow handles titles like this. Honestly, I thought that this was going to be kind of a nightmare to play on. I didn't necessarily think that I'd actually use it, and I didn't think the performance would be up to par for what I honestly wanted to experience out of it, but I was completely wrong. It's not often that you see a device this compact with specs like this, and I think it's crazy that even for a display of this spec, the Flow is able to saturate it and not make you feel like any hardware was wasted. It's just, in my opinion, a very balanced device. Now, I actually like the form factor a lot more personally. I really feel like it doesn't take up that much more space when you consider something like a handheld, since you need a bulky carrying case to protect the joysticks, and you also need to worry about the handheld's charger as well. Whereas with the Flow, it fits in a laptop sleeve, in a bag, and you barely even know it's there. Sure, it's not the thinnest or the lightest, but if you're carrying a handheld, you're almost always going to be carrying a backpack as well, and I really do feel like that because of the Flow's footprint, it's actually more convenient, at least for me. Even with the power adapter, when I'm carrying the full 200-watt brick in my bag, as well as the mouse that I use, I'm able to still have a ton of space for other essentials that I need to take with me. Now, that leads me into the problem with the Flow, essentially what everyone seems to be complaining about, and that's the price point. I understand that $2,100 is a lot for a device that is essentially very niched down, but is the only thing making this device niche for people its form factor? Sure, it's got that gamer aesthetic, it's basically a Microsoft Surface on crack, and to some it could be a little more inconvenient, but the Flow can do what my MacBook can. It can also sort of do what my iPad can be used for, and it replaces the need for me to carry a handheld when I'm traveling. So this thing for me basically serves as 3 devices, and considering that I can dock it into my setup and get great performance out of it, I also realistically don't need... Can you even see it? a gaming PC. So when you add all of that up, yeah, sure, $2,100 is a lot of money for a device. I'm not saying that this thing is cheap, but the devices that it essentially could replace in my everyday life, I mean, they cost a lot more than $2,100. So this thing kind of sounds like a really big value if you look at it like that. I think one flaw that I see in the Z13, aside from its price point, is that they didn't include Thunderbolt 5, which means that higher end eGPUs aren't going to get the bandwidth that they actually need to be able to run on something like this. It does suck because ASUS's XG Mobile, the new one, does support Thunderbolt 5. It would have been really nice to have. But aside from that, I just can't help but appreciate what ASUS and AMD have been able to accomplish with this chip, this form factor, and overall with just how solid this thing has been for me. So who is this for? Chances are if you're watching this video, you're interested in it. And if that's the case, I would say if you have the money to, try it out. You know, when you buy from reputable retailers, usually there's a really good return policy. So just read into that, see what this device is like at home, see if this is something that you think you could utilize, because truthfully, I really don't want to let go of this thing. And every time I pick up my MacBook, I'm just thinking like, man, I just need to go back to like Resolve or Premiere or something and just use this instead of every other device that I throw my way. I like the idea of simplifying things, and this honestly could do it no problem. I plan to take this to Taiwan as my main device over Computex, and I'm just really excited to see what this is like when it comes to content creation. So if that's something that you want to see, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll get to that video in May when it's time. But yeah, if you enjoyed this one, a like and a sub to the channel goes a really long way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you all in the next one. And before you go, drop an alligator drop an alligator emoji in the comments so I know who the real ones are. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.